So yesterday I made a post about hell and how hell doesn't exist, and all the Christians with their tiki torches came after me in the comments. So I'm going to further explain why hell doesn't exist in the Bible. Most Christians don't look at the historical climate when they read the Bible. They take scripture out of context and make post-it stamps out of verses, but you can't do that. You see, during the time of Christ, there was a lot of tension between Rome and Judea and Samaria. Political tension, economical tension, and social tension. In fact, all throughout Samaria, there would be uprisings from zealots, also known as Zionists, and Rome would have to march over there and put out the fires. So basically, the energetic momentum was building up for a massive rebellion against Rome on the part of the Jews. So in the words of Christ, the harvest was ripe, but the laborers were few. You see, Yeshua was prolific. He was many things, including clairvoyant. He was a seer, and what many in the religious circle will call a prophet. And he saw the destruction of Jerusalem. He saw the end, or what many religious apocalyptic thinkers will call the end of the world. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was the end of Jerusalem. So Yeshua had a mandate. His mandate was to save as many Jews and proselytes as possible in a short amount of time. But the problem is that the religious and political leaders of Jerusalem at the time loved their religion. They loved their religion more than they loved God, and they hated Yeshua for preaching this new age doctrine. Please follow me here. You see, Yeshua saw the end of Jerusalem, or the destruction of Jerusalem, and he was preaching freedom from religion. The one thing that held the Jews in Jerusalem was their religious practices. Because every year, Jews from all over the world, would travel or pilgrimage down to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover feast. So every year, there would be millions of Jews packed into the city. So the Jerusalem of back then isn't the same size as Jerusalem of now. It was much more smaller. It was like the size of downtown Boston. Imagine millions of Jews packed into downtown Boston. Which brings me to hell. You see, Jesus didn't speak English, he spoke Aramaic, so he used the word Gehenna. Now, what was Gehenna? Gehenna was a location outside of Jerusalem. It was a valley right outside of the city walls where they would burn trash. Now, you can imagine in those days, they didn't have sanitation as we do now. So in order to keep their city from diseases and sicknesses, they would have to burn trash continuously in Gehenna. In fact, it was a place where they would just throw dead animals or even people if they were just too poor to afford proper burial. They would just throw them in the valley where the worm dies not and the fire is never quenched. The thing about Gehenna is that it was considered a curse. I mean, yeah, if you were too poor to receive a proper burial and you were just thrown into Gehenna, sure, yeah, you're cursed. And if you were a hardened criminal who had just been crucified and thrown into Gehenna, you were cursed. Yeshua used mostly parables to communicate the destruction that was coming to Jerusalem. So when Yeshua said to the masses, if your right eye offend you, pluck it out and cast it from you, it is better that one of your members perish than the whole body enter into Gehenna. He was basically using Gehenna as an example of the style in which the body or the nation of the Jews was going to suffer during its destruction. I'll go a little deeper. He said, if your right eye offend you, pluck it out. The Jewish leadership, the Pharisees, were the eyes of the body of the Jewish people. And Yeshua called the Pharisees the blind leading the blind. So he's basically telling the masses, if your leadership is offending you, pluck them out, get rid of them. It is better for you to do that than for you and the body and the rest of the nation to enter into a Gehenna-style destruction in those days that are coming. And sure enough, we all know the story. They unalived Yeshua for speaking out against the Jewish leadership. They unalived the man, but they could not unalive his prophecy because 33 years later, after his unaliving, remember, he was 33 when he passed. But 33 years later, as a demarcation of what they did to him, Rome besieged Jerusalem for 3.5 years. Remember when I said Yeshua had a mandate to save the Jews from the coming destruction? In order to do so, he had to change their mind about their religion and their religious practices, but they would not listen. Because when Rome besieged Jerusalem. It was during the Passover, and Jews from all over the world had gone into Jerusalem, packed into Jerusalem, and now they're besieged for 3.5 years. During those days, Rome didn't allow food or water to get in the city for 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years, Jews were dying from famine, starvation, and unaliving each other for resources. Hundreds of thousands of Jews perished from a famine, and to keep the bodies from rotting in the city streets, they threw them over the walls. Into where? Into Gehenna, where the worm dies not and the fires never quenched. At the end of the 3.5 years, Rome burned down that entire city and the temple. Millions of Jews lost their lives in the fires and in the famine. And because the temple had been destroyed, the Jews could no longer lay claim to Palestine. And this is what Yeshua meant when he referred to that dispensation as the last days.